I'm feeling a little bit emotional. It's a little surreal to me to be in front of cameras. For most of my life, I had to hide from cameras. I had to live in the shadows. It's hard for me to talk about my mother to people that aren't direct family. That I wasn't supposed to talk about family and the family business to other people. And my mother always taught me that we're far from weak, that we're Blancos, and that we fear nobody. I started to understand that my mother wasn't a regular person. My mother was something different. A lot of people say my mother was an evil person, but every story has two sides. And Griselda Blanco's story had two sides. And that's why I choose to tell this story. My mother was Griselda Blanco de Trujillo. She was a very elegant lady, but when she went from elegant to rude, it was like a light switch. My father's name is Rubén Darío Sepúlveda. He was also known as El Artista, the actor, they would call him, because of his flamboyant lifestyle. He acted like a celebrity, but you knew that my mother was the top of the totem pole. He knew his limits. And when she said something, he would have to bow down. I was born nearly 10 years after my other brother. She wasn't gonna have more kids. And then I came along. I knew that we were different, and I knew that she was the boss. I know we lived in a mansion. I know we had cars, but I didn't really understand what my mother did for a living. They used to call her the chameleon because she knew how to put on costumes.
What do you think Mommy should be wearing tonight, baby?
In my mother's master bedrooms, she'd always have, the little round heads where she would place her wigs, and she would have multiple colored wigs, different style wigs. And she would dress up before going out with my father or going out for a business meeting with somebody. And I'd be like, what's up with all these wigs, Mommy?
Oh, baby, this one is pretty. What do you say?
She was camouflaging herself. And then she started to tell me, okay, if anybody ever asks you our names, my name is Beatriz and your father's name is Tony. And I go, no, it's not. You're Griselda, and he's Darío. They're like, no, my name is Beatriz, and his name is Tony. What are our names? And she constantly drilled me.
And if people ask, what are our names? Do you remember?
Beatriz and Tony.
Good job.
And I got it engraved in my head. So much that my neighbors would ask my father's name, and I'd be like, it's Tony and Beatriz. I thought my mother was some type of celebrity. I looked at her as an actress. I didn't know. I thought my mom was just having a good time wearing these different color wigs and different clothes and her different glasses. One thing my mother always told me is that I shouldn't talk about everything I saw in the household, because there's certain things that was only for us to talk about. For example, I remember one time she had this huge walk-in closet. I used to love playing in this closet. And I remember one day going into the closet and she had blocks of money on the shelf above her furs.
What did I tell you about snooping around?
And I questioned her repeatedly on it. Why did she always have so much money in the house?
Do you want to have a little bit of fun while mommy's working? All right, let's go.
She would bring it down and she would be like, okay, you want to play with the money? Let's play with the money. She'd be stacking the money with me and would train me in what I can discuss and what I couldn't discuss with the regular people outside my house. When people ask me about why are you guys so rich, why do you have Mercedes limos, my mother always taught me to say that we own real estate and whatever you do, don't share the fact that I have all that money in the closet with anybody. I knew that was her and my secret. But I didn't really understand that other kids, their parents didn't have blocks of money in their closet. I lived a very solitary life. I don't really have memories of me playing with too many kids. I wasn't allowed to go to school. I was being home taught by a private tutor. There was a point in time that I didn't even leave the house. I'd see kids in the neighborhood riding their bikes, and I'd tell my mom, can I go outside and play with the kids? And my mother would tell me, not today, tomorrow. And I'm like, that's what you told me yesterday. And then she told me again, not today. And I would ask her why. And she would tell me that I had to understand that it wasn't quite safe for me to be in the neighborhood. And I'd be stuck in my house for days. To have my brothers around, all three of my brothers, to me, that was like the best thing in my life. My siblings were my best friends. But most of the time, I'd find myself wandering around the house. So it was one of those times that she just happened to leave her little purse on the table in the dining room. And I ran in there, and I'm like, nosy little kid, let me see what she has in this purse. I remember opening her purse and seeing the gun. She always had this little chrome 38 in there. I wondered why she had a weapon. And I remember her coming into the room and seeing me look through the purse.
What are you doing?
She screamed at me and she told me, don't do that again.
You don't touch that ever.
She starts telling me the reason why I have to have this gun is because you know the big ring that mommy has? The big diamond ring. A lot of people want to take that ring from me. So I have to carry this in order to, protect us from the thieves.
But just in case, mommy keeps that in her purse. You understand?
I understood that she had things that were worth a lot of money. So it made sense to me completely. We're so filthy rich that people want to hurt us.
Get Michael out of here.
I was escorted to the room on the side, and then a couple minutes later is when I started hearing the screams.
Oh, no! Stop!
I started realizing when I was younger that we were a different type of family. There was always an entourage of men. And I started to see more weapons, To me, it was, oh, they're protecting us because we're so rich. But when you have people living in your house at a 24-hour basis, they're no longer bodyguards. They're like my family. They'd be close to us while we ate. So dinner was a real big deal in my house.
How is everyone doing?
And I remember one day, here comes a certain individual that wasn't accustomed to sitting with the family. So he comes armed to the table. And my mother flipped out.
What did I tell you?
My mother starts to scream at him, and he's in a state of shock. Everybody's silent, just looking at him like, oh, you messed up now.
You do not bring a gun to this table.
My mother didn't have a midpoint. If she went into a rage, she went into a rage. Her eyes would turn red. She would shake. And if she didn't physically strike the person, she'd get to the point that she was about to.
Sorry, I didn't know.
And she said, don't you ever do that freaking again. Put that gun up right now. We're gonna eat dinner.
Right now.
He had to go back and put his weapon up. And he never did that again, I'll tell you that much. I thought it was normal for men to walk around armed. I thought everybody had security. This is a crazy picture. Was taken in Walt Disney World. And then you see the four men in the back. One's my uncle, and all the others are bodyguards. Let me ask you, do you think that's right? When you can't even go on vacation without being surrounded by evil? But this is normal. Not only is it normal, but I remember having a great time. I became attached to a lot of the bodyguards that were around us along, because remember, I was a kid. I had no friends. So when one would disappear, it would affect me. This was my family. My mother always kept one certain individual around me, always. He was like a big brother. I saw him when I woke up. I saw him when I went to sleep. I saw him all day. I loved the guy. He was my best friend. And then one day he wasn't there. So I get up and I'm like, where's Mario?
Mario? Mario!
Mario usually comes, shakes me out of bed to go eat breakfast.
Mario!
Nobody answers. And then I hear my mom's voice.
Michael, honey.
Where's Mario?
Mario had to leave, you know? And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, yeah, Mario went to college. When people disappear, they go to college. She would tell me, Michael, sometimes they have to go back to school to learn better. And I really didn't understand, what do you mean? But he was around us for a long time. How could he just leave? And then I was like, why is there so many people in our family in college?
You should be happy for him.
My mother had this thing that you would ask her once or twice, and after that, I kind of understood that she didn't want to share. And I had to respect that because I didn't want to anger her. It happened a lot of times with other family members. They would disappear. And I guess you're supposed to get used to something like that, but that's not normal. In a normal family, people just don't disappear forever. Little did I know what really happened to them. We were on a family vacation and we were staying at a hotel at the beach. And some of my mom's bodyguards bring in this individual. You could tell that he was forced to be there. And the man sees my mother and he turns pale. He turns white. And then he looks at her and tells her, "You fat son of a," screaming at my mother, "I'm gonna see you in hell."
You go to hell.
And my mother tells him, "Yeah, I'll see you in hell. But when you get there, you tell him Blanco sent you."
Get Michael out of here right now.
No. No. No.
And I was escorted to the room on the side, and then a couple minutes later is when I started hearing the screams.
No. No.
I had never heard a man scream like that. I had never heard anything scream like that before in my life. After a while, my mother walks into the room,
Are you okay, Michael?
and I told her, "Why was that man screaming?" And she tried to tell me, "Don't worry about that. Pretend you never heard that before."
Good boy.
But I understood that that man wasn't screaming anymore. Things kind of changed right then and there. I started to understand that my mother wasn't a regular person. My mother was something different. I never feared her, but I understood that she was to be feared. This guy was one of my father's employees. I see one of the men just throwing the gasoline on him, and then I could see the anger in my father's eyes. My father was having a get-together. My father has music playing. There's people dancing, and I was supposed to be upstairs, but I ran downstairs for a little bit to see what all the commotion was. I see a beautiful woman dressed in all red, and she's incredible. I was taught by my brothers to be a man, and it's okay to call a woman beautiful or call her una mamacita. It's okay to squeeze a beautiful woman. This is what I was taught, to be a man, so I didn't understand that I was about to do something wrong. I somehow got up under her dress and I grabbed the lady. And it was like a scene from a movie. The music stopped playing.
What do you think you're doing? You think you can just touch a woman like that? Is that it?
The lady's husband was right there. And he said, you know, "This little son of a bitch." And he snatches me. My father heard him call me a little son of a bitch and snatch me in a violent fashion. So all I remember was my father telling him, "What did you say? What did you just call my son?"
You disrespected my son.
It enraged my father. You know, I could see the anger in my father's eyes.
You come in my house. You disrespect my family? Boys, get him out of here.
My father tells one of the bodyguards, "Take him upstairs now." As I'm going up the stairs, I see them dragging him out. As one of the men is putting me in my room, I hear the gunshots. I ran downstairs. I see one of the men just throwing the gasoline on him. And then my father screams at them and tells them, "What the hell?" You know, like, "Hey, take the kid back upstairs. What's wrong with you guys?"
Get him out of here.
And I didn't really see them lighting. But I felt the heat from the fire. Even though I was upstairs in my room, I knew that that somehow was my fault. You know, I grabbed his wife where I shouldn't have grabbed her. Still bothers me to this day. Something I'll never forget. The next day, when I woke up, I saw the remains. When I told my mother what had happened, she wasn't surprised. She said it was a bad thing, that I shouldn't have seen it. But that was my father, that I would have to understand that if that happened, it's because it had to be done. I remember one night waking up to my mother and my father arguing.
Who the hell do you think you are?
Griselle, just stop this, please.
I come out the room to see them screaming at each other, my mother in tears, and I heard her crying and screaming at my father. What a scumbag he was, and how could he do that to her? And it turns out my father was cheating on my mother with an American lady. She was a tall, beautiful, blonde woman. So I guess my mother took it very personally.
Get out of my house
It was
right
just a
now!
one-time thing.
And I heard my mother tell him, "You son of a bitch, don't worry, I'm gonna kill that gringa bitch for you." She was getting madder and madder. And then I would see my father argue back,
What do you want?
which wasn't a good thing because my mother was the boss. Right then and there, I understood that their marriage was over. I understood that. That's it. My father didn't have a place in my mother's household anymore. I never saw my father with that lady again. And I found that weird, that this lady that I saw with my father before more than once just completely disappeared. My father left, and then I saw my father a couple more times on visiting day. My father would come pick me up and take me out and then bring me back. And one day, my father came to pick me up, told my mom we were gonna go to the mall. And instead of going to the mall, we headed straight to the airport and we boarded a plane. And next thing I know, I was in Colombia. I started asking my father questions, and I'm like, "Papi, where's mommy? What are we doing here?" And my father just telling me, "No, don't worry. It's just a little trip. It's just a little vacation. You'll see your mommy again, but you're gonna spend a couple of days with me." I didn't understand that he had basically kidnapped me. My father understands what's about to happen. So, my father starts to run. And all I hear is that canyon. Boom, 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 boom. My father had taken me out the country without my mother's permission. He had kidnapped me, basically. And as we're heading towards the town, these police officers, they tell us to pull over. One of the police officers that was sitting on the motorcycle, he gets off and he approaches my father and he asks him for his documents. And my father's like talking to the man.
Is there anything that we can do?
And the head cop tells my dad to, come, get out the car. I want to talk to you.
I'll be right back.
My dad gets out the car, and they're like, "All right, don't make any moves." Then my father understands what's about to happen. So my father starts to run. He takes off. and I see a short man with an Uzi, and I hear it, and I see it. I look the other way, and to this day, I remember what the other person was shooting us with. He was shooting us with a Luger, and he's just sitting there, bam, bam, bam. And I look at my father, and he's just covered in holes, and he's just bleeding. I shake him, and he doesn't move. My father was shot 27 times. That was the worst day of my life. My mother sent somebody to pick me up, and I was back in Miami after a couple days or a week.
Mommy.
Oh, Michael. Oh, my boy. I'm so happy that you're home.
I was so happy to be back in my mother's hands, and she just held me. I cried for a little bit. People started spreading the rumor that it was my mother who had my father killed for kidnapping me. I asked my mother who was responsible for the killing of my father, and she would tell me that it was our enemies. She told me, you saw what happened to Papi. The same people that hurt my father would probably try to hurt me again, do the same thing to her, that we had to protect each other, that the only thing that mattered to her was me.
Everything is going to be fine. Do you trust me?
Yes, I trust you, Mommy.
My mother became so protective of me that she was always with me everywhere we went. I couldn't even sleep in my own room. I had to sleep next to my mom every night, and I had to be with her everywhere. I got very attached to her.
Don't you worry. Mommy will keep you safe. Are you all packed?
Yeah.
My mother told me that we were in a state of emergency, that we couldn't be in one house too long because the bad man that killed my father might try to come kill us. We always had suitcases filled with, a couple of change of clothes, her personal effects, and always with money. My mom always had a suitcase full of money. If it was time to go, she would just tell me, Michael, grab your little backpack, it's time to go. She also taught me about the guys with the 3 letters on their jackets.
What do you do if these men get to the door?
Don't answer.
Good boy.
That if I would ever see these men with jackets and these letters on their jackets, that they might be there to take her away or do bad things to me. She never told me, FBI or DEA. I learned that the day they came to take my mother away. I see these gentlemen get out the car. And what are they? They're gentlemen with blue jackets and letters on their back and on their front. And my mother had already warned me about these gentlemen. I'm thinking they're here to kidnap me or they're here to hurt me like they hurt us in Colombia. The living room is flooded with people. And they're just tearing up the walls, the couches. There was such a commotion that I didn't know what was happening. There's hundreds of people here in my house. What are they doing in my house? They're ransacking my kitchen. They were searching for stuff I didn't know at the time. They walked me up the stairs, and my mother was sitting there next to the Bible. and she was crying.
My gun! I have told you before, it isn't mine! What do you mean?
Before that day, I can't recall seeing my mother cry. So I run in to hug my mother and I tell her, "Why are you crying?" And she's like, "I don't know what these men are here for, Michael."
Everything is going to be fine. I promise you.
I remember they had her 38, and she kept on telling me, "These men say that's my gun, but that's not my gun, Michael. I don't know whose gun that is."
I promise you. I'm gonna fight for us.
She kept on trying to tell me, "Don't worry. These gentlemen are mistaken. They think I'm somebody else." This was the day that my mother was taken away from me. In many ways, this day was worse than the day I saw my father assassinated. Because when my father died, I still had my mother. And I look at her eyes and I'm thinking, what are you thinking right now? Did she know that she was gonna spend the next 20-something years in jail, in prison? That stare is a stare of a woman that is still determined to win, even though she's lost it all right there. And we lost it all right there. In that moment, the jig was up. It was over. One of my cousins starts to tell me,
"Do you really not know who your mother is?"
What do you mean?
he goes, "You know your mother's la madrina. Your mother is my father's boss, and my mother's boss, and everybody's boss." And I go, "Boss of what?"
Michael, open your eyes.
And that's when he tells me, he goes, "Your mother is the queen of cocaine."
Do you not really know who your mother is?
I know she's a very important person.
My older cousin is babysitting me, and he tells me, "Your mother is the queen of cocaine.
She's in charge of all this.
Your mother's the Black Widow. She's the boss of bosses to all the Colombians."
Can't believe you didn't know that.
It was like in the movies when your whole life flashes in front of your face and, you know, all the tape rewinds and then it fast forward. Everything started to make sense. Those guys with the guns, my bodyguards, they were really bodyguards and hitmen. The different houses were really safe houses. The violent situations, it was just like in The Godfather. But it was in the Blanco family. I realized that I was just like Michael Corleone in the movie. Except there was no Godfather in my movie, there was a godmother, and it was my mother. Originally, my mother was accused of multiple murders and homicides and for drug trafficking. The violence that she created touched a lot of people's households. They said my mother was suspected of ordering over 200 assassinations. She destroyed families. When I found out the truth, it hurt me to know that she destroyed other people's life and family. Because I didn't know that Griselda. I know my mommy. Believe it or not, I love this picture. It was a hard time in my life, but visiting day was the happiest day of the week for me in my teenage years. During my mother's incarceration, we'd constantly tell each other that, she'd be home soon, that she'd be free, And then 1 year would turn into two to seven to 20-something years. She was supposed to be released in 1993. And in 1993, the state of Florida accused her of 2 more murders. She was facing the electric chair with one of those murders, and she was able to take a plea. One day, after a couple whiskeys, my brother decided to bring it upon himself and tell me the truth after harassing him.
Come on. Tell me what happened.
You sure you want to know the truth?
Yeah.
He said, yeah, Michael. Our mom had your dad killed for kidnapping you. She wasn't gonna let anybody steal her baby boy. You know when you know something, but you wish you never knew that? I knew. And to this day, I kind of want to still lie to myself and say it wasn't so. Because it hurts. I went to visit my mother in the correctional facility where she was, and I just wanted to hear the truth. I just need to know. I told her, Mom, really, who killed my father? Was it you? And she told me, no, Papi, you know who it was. It was our enemies. She never admitted it to me. Not once. But when I looked into her eyes, I knew. I saw a scared lady that didn't want to tell her child the truth. In a way, I'm glad that my mother never answered that question truthfully. If she would have told me the truth, I think it might have set a seed of hatred towards her. So I didn't want to touch the subject again. I didn't want to hear it come out of her mouth. This was a picture that was taken before she was released. I see a person that is confused because she doesn't know what tomorrow is going to bring. She doesn't know what the real world has in store for her. Upon her release, my mother was deported to Colombia. I maintained a constant relationship with my mother. We would speak and Skype every day, 3, 4, 5 times a day. But I was always in fear that her being sent back to her native country was in a way signing her death warrant. And that's what happened. I got a phone call from a family friend, and he told me she was at a local carniceria, which is a butcher shop. 2 individuals pulled up on a motorcycle. One got out, shot her twice in the head. And I broke down I was in a state of shock. I've been expecting that phone call my whole life, but I still didn't want to believe it. My minister once told me that you live by the sword, you die by the sword. And I guess that's what happened in my mother's story. I dabbled in the family business. It's public record. My arrests and things, I had to learn the hard way. I had to make a choice to go 100% legal. I had to make a choice to not continue that generational curse, because that's exactly what it is. It's a generational curse. Because my brothers carried on, took over the family business. This cocaine lifestyle has destroyed our family. Over 22 members of my family are dead. My father, my brothers, my cousins, my aunts, my uncles, our best friends. I'm one of the last males in my family. I'm the last Blanco.
The morning sun rose pale and hesitant over a stretch of empty Texas road, the kind where silence feels heavier than air. Dew clung to the grass, and somewhere in the distance a dog barked once, then stopped as if the world itself was holding its breath. On June 17, 1985, a pickup truck sat abandoned by the shoulder outside the small town of Denton Creek. The driver's door hung open, keys still in the ignition, a single high heel lying in the dust nearby. That was how the story began, the kind of scene that locals would whisper about for decades, the kind that would fade into myth until one day a single confession would rip it open again. Her name was Caroline Baker, 23 years old, a nursing student at the community college. Everyone in Denton Creek knew her. The sheriff's wife cut her hair. The pastor's son used to sit behind her in class. She had plans that summer to leave for Dallas, start a new job, maybe even marry her high school sweetheart who worked the oil rigs down south. But that night, Caroline never made it home. Her truck was found at dawn, her purse inside her ID, untouched, the radio still playing faintly. The search began within hours, but by the end of that day, the fear had already rooted itself deep into the town. They combed the nearby fields, sent boats down the river, brought in dogs. Nothing. No footprints, no blood, no sign of struggle, only that single heel pressed into the dirt as if she'd stepped out and simply vanished. Reporters arrived, flashing lights on the highway microphones, trembling in the heat. The phrase "small-town nightmare" appeared in headlines before the week was over. And yet, behind the noise, behind the cameras, detectives were left with the same cold facts: an empty truck, an empty field, and a girl whose smile now haunted every missing person poster tacked onto the diner wall. Months passed. Then, years. Leads died faster than they came. Witnesses remembered shadows that changed shape with every retelling. Someone swore they saw her at a gas station 2 towns over. Someone else claimed she'd run away with a man in a blue Camaro. None of it fit. By the early 90s, the evidence box was gathering dust in the county archive labeled simply Baker C., 1985. Her parents kept the porch light on every night for 10 years long after hope had turned to ritual. And the town, like so many others, learned to live with the silence. Then 40 years later, that silence cracked. It began with a storm, the kind that tears roofs and memories apart. In April of 2025, a nursing home in Fort Worth called the police about one of their residents, a man in his late 70s who'd stopped taking his medication, who kept muttering about a girl named Caroline. His name was Roy Ellison, a retired mechanic. No criminal record, no history of violence. But when a young officer asked what he meant, the old man looked straight into her eyes and said, "I left her there, by the creek. She was crying, and I didn't stop." Detectives thought it was nonsense, a confused patient drifting between dreams and guilt, but procedure demanded they check it out. The next morning, a small team drove to Denton Creek, a place most of them had only seen in files, yellowed with age. The coordinates Ellison gave were rough, just a stretch of overgrown brush along the riverbank. But when they dug, the earth yielded something that no one had expected, a fragment of fabric, faded red, buried beneath a tangle of roots. A few feet deeper, a human femur. Then, another. The medical examiner needed weeks, but when the DNA results came back, there was no doubt. Caroline Baker had finally been found. The discovery hit the news like a thunderclap. Old photographs resurfaced grainy images of Caroline at her graduation, her eyes bright with a future she never reached. The town that had once whispered now gasped collectively, reliving every rumor, every theory, every sleepless night. For the detectives, it was the reopening of a wound older than most of their careers. But for Roy Ellison, sitting under the dim fluorescent lights of an interrogation room, it was something else entirely. He confessed slowly, haltingly, like a man trying to dig his own soul out from under decades of dirt. He'd met Caroline at a gas station the night she vanished. Her truck had broken down. He offered help. He said she laughed at one of his jokes. Then, in his words, something broke loose inside me. He talked about the argument, the struggle, the sound of the river swallowing her last breath. He'd buried her under a cottonwood tree, thinking no one would ever find her. He'd moved away within the year, changed jobs, married, raised a family. Every time he drove past a creek, he said he heard her voice. The detectives recorded every word, but there was no satisfaction, only that strange, heavy quiet that fills a room when truth finally walks in. They asked him why now, after all these years. He said he was tired of the dreams, tired of waking up to the sound of gravel under his tires. "I see her face," he whispered. "I can't breathe when I see her face." The sheriff, who'd been a rookie in 1985, came out of retirement to attend the press conference. Cameras, flashed microphones crowded the podium. After 40 years, he said, his voice trembling, "We can finally say her name and know she's at rest." But even as the words left his mouth, something about the confession didn't sit right. The timeline, the details, the way Roy described the color of the truck, it was off. Subtle, but off. Investigators began to wonder if the old man's memory had blurred, if guilt had rewritten his past. Was he truly the killer, or just the vessel for a story that had consumed the town for decades? The case was declared closed. Caroline was buried beside her parents in the small churchyard on Elm Street, her grave blanketed in lilies and tears. Reporters called it closure, but those who had lived through the years of silence knew better. There are some truths that arrive too late to be trusted, some confessions that sound too rehearsed, too desperate to erase a life of lies. And in the archives deep within the evidence vault, the file marked Baker C. still sits open, its edges frayed by time. Inside lies a Polaroid taken that same summer of '85. Caroline standing by her truck, smiling into the sunlight. In the background, barely visible, a shadow leans against a fence post. No one ever identified the figure. 40 years later, it still watches from the edge of the photograph, frozen in that endless Texas heat, while the wind carries the same question through the empty fields. If Roy Ellison wasn't the one who took her then, who buried the truth beneath Denton Creek? The night after Roy Ellison's confession, Denton Creek didn't sleep. Reporters swarmed the town square, their vans flickering with the blue glow of satellite dishes. Residents gathered outside the sheriff's office like ghosts revisiting a wound. They whispered the same name again and again, Caroline Baker. A name that had lived in silence now echoed in every doorway, every flickering TV. The air smelled of wet asphalt and old fear. Inside the interrogation room, Roy sat motionless, hands, folded eyes staring at the wall. The storm outside cracked against the windows, and for a moment it felt as though nature itself demanded answers. Detective Lena Morales, the lead investigator, watched him through the glass. She was born the same year Caroline disappeared. For her, this wasn't just a cold case. It was the ghost story every Texas child grew up hearing. And now she was the one who had to decide whether the ghost finally had a name. Roy's voice was faint when he spoke. "You think I'm lying?" he asked, eyes unfocused. Lena didn't respond. She wanted to believe him. Everyone did. The town needed closure like a dying man needed air. But truth, she'd learned, doesn't always arrive with clean hands. The details in Roy's story gnawed at her: the timeline, the riverbank, the wrong model of truck. In 1985, Caroline drove a Chevy C10. Roy said it was a Ford Ranger. A small thing maybe, but cold cases often hinge on small things. When Roy fell asleep in his chair, mumbling into his sleeve, Lena stepped into the hall. The file box sat open on the table, yellowed notes, brittle Polaroids, photos of the old creek road long before it was paved. She picked up a faded report written by Sheriff Dale Henson, dated June 19, 1985. A name was scrawled in the corner: Witness J. Pruitt. No one had mentioned that witness in the confession. She flipped through the attached statement. J. Pruitt was a ranch hand who claimed to have seen a man parked behind Caroline's truck that night, but the description didn't match Roy Ellison. The witness described someone younger, broad shoulders, dark hair, a scar on the left hand. Roy had been 38 back. Then soft-spoken, average build, no scars. The more Lena read, the more something inside her began to tighten. The next morning, she drove out to the nursing home where Roy had lived for 6 years. His room smelled of disinfectant and old cologne. On the dresser sat a Bible, a stack of Polaroids, and a shoebox labeled Summer '85. Inside were photos of fishing trips, cars, roadside diners, and one photograph stopped her cold: a picture of a young woman standing by a gas pump. The same smile, the same freckles. Caroline Baker. Lena's pulse quickened. She turned the photo over. On the back, written in blue ink, Caroline, Denton Creek, June '85. R. The handwriting was neat, but not shaky like Roy's current script. More careful. Younger. She flipped through the rest of the box. Another photo showed a group of men at a body shop posing beside an old truck. Roy was there, younger, clean-shaven. Beside him stood another man, taller, square jaw, a deep scar across his left hand. Lena's breath caught. She whispered to herself, Pruitt's witness wasn't wrong. The name tag on the back of the photo read Eddie Vaughn. According to the personnel record, Vaughn worked with Roy at the auto shop in 1985. A month after Caroline vanished, Vaughn left town. No forwarding address, no record. He simply disappeared like she had. Lena's gut screamed that Roy wasn't telling everything. Maybe he'd been there that night. Maybe he'd helped bury her. But someone else had done the killing. And 40 years later, that someone was still out there or buried in the same dirt. She returned to the station and called the Texas Crime Database. Run a name, she said, her voice steady. Edward Vaughn. Last known address, Denton Creek, 1985. The operator paused, typing. We've got a record of death in 1997. Deceased in an accident outside Amarillo. Lena leaned back in her chair. The thunder outside rolled again, low and heavy. If Eddie Vaughn was dead, then Roy's confession might have been a last act of penance, not for his own crime, but for someone else's. Still, something didn't fit. When she looked closer at the autopsy record, she found that Vaughn's remains had never been properly identified. The coroner's report said the body was burned beyond recognition ID based on personal effects. The only thing found intact was a metal keychain, the shape of a riverboat engraved with the initials CB. Lena's blood went cold. Caroline Baker. She stared at the file long enough for the office lights to flicker. Outside, rain smeared the windows like tears. The case once thought solved had just cracked open wider than before. She went back to the interview room. Roy was awake now, watching her with those clouded gray eyes. Eddie, she said quietly, tell me about Eddie Vaughn. Roy's lip trembled. He didn't answer. His gaze shifted to the camera in the corner, the red light blinking like a heartbeat. Roy, Lena pressed, was he with you that night? He closed his eyes. For a long time, there was only the hum of the air vent. Then he whispered, barely audible. It was supposed to be a joke. A joke, he nodded slowly. She was laughing. Eddie said, we'd scare her a little, that's all. He said he just wanted to talk. But when she ran, his voice cracked. He didn't stop. The words hung there, suspended in the stale air. Lena leaned forward. So it was him. Eddie Vaughn killed Caroline. Roy's eyes filled with tears. He said nobody would find her. He made me dig. He said if I told anyone, I'd join her. Lena exhaled, heart pounding. This was the truth the confession had been hiding, not guilt alone, but complicity. Roy wasn't the killer. He was the witness who carried a murderer's secret for 40 years. As she stood to leave, Roy reached for her sleeve. "Detective," he whispered, "if he's dead, then why do I still see him by the creek?" The next day, Lena drove back to Denton Creek. The rain had stopped, leaving the world washed and raw. The cottonwood tree stood like a skeleton against the sky. The dig site was quiet, only the distant rush of water breaking the silence. She knelt by the dirt, brushing her hand over the fresh soil where Caroline's remains had been found. Then she saw at something half buried near the roots, a piece of metal glinting in the light. She dug it out carefully, a keychain. The same riverboat shape from Vaughn's autopsy file, only this one wasn't old or burned. It was new. Engraved on the back, the letters EV 2024. Lena froze. The sound of the creek grew louder, heavier, almost like breathing. Somewhere beyond the trees, a branch snapped. She turned sharply, heart hammering. Nothing. Only the empty road, the wind pushing through the grass. But when she looked back down, the dirt where the keychain had been was already wet, as if something beneath the ground had begun to bleed through again. And for the first time since the confession, Lena felt the sense that this case, no matter how many files they closed, wasn't finished. That the earth still held voices that refused to stay buried. The next morning, the sky over Denton Creek was a dull bruise. Mist clung to the fields, softening everything except the crime scene tape fluttering in the wind. Detective Lena Morales stood where the ground had been disturbed, the place where the old bones of Caroline Baker had been unearthed, and where just a day before she'd found something impossible, a new keychain marked EV 2024. She'd barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the flash of metal in the dirt, the initials gleaming under a gray sky, the thought that maybe somehow Eddie Vaughn wasn't dead. The report said Vaughn died in a fire outside Amarillo in '97. A house fire, total loss. The coroner had based the identification on a few belongings, no dental match, no DNA confirmation back then. It wasn't routine. They'd found the remains, what little there was, beside a melted toolbox, a riverboat keychain, and a half-empty whiskey bottle. Case closed. Nobody questioned it. But the keychain in Lena's hand had been forged nearly 3 decades later. Same design, same engraving. And now, she couldn't stop thinking about Roy's trembling words. If he's dead, then why do I still see him by the creek? At dawn, she called the medical examiner's office in Amarillo. "I need the 1997 Vaughn file pulled," she said, "and I want the remains exhumed. DNA comparison immediately." The clerk hesitated. "Detective, that case is almost 30 years old." "Then dig faster." Lena snapped, her voice low, controlled. "If he's dead, we'll prove it. If he's not, then someone's been walking free with a dead man's name." By mid-morning, she was back at the nursing home. Roy Ellison's room was empty. The nurse said he'd been transferred overnight precautionary mental health evaluation, they told her. She knew what that meant. He was under protective custody now. The department didn't want the press near him until the dust settled. She walked to the window, the smell of bleach sharp in the air. On the sill sat something she hadn't noticed before. An old photograph warped from age. It showed 2 men standing on a dirt road beside a pickup. One of them was Roy, the other Eddie Vaughn. In the background, the faint outline of a wooden sign, Baker Farm Private Property. Lena's chest tightened. Vaughn hadn't just known Caroline, he'd been on her land. Hours later, she was standing there herself at what used to be the Baker property, now a tangle of weeds and rusted fences. The farmhouse was long gone, reduced to its stone foundation and a few collapsed beams. Only the well remained covered by a rotting plank. The air smelled like wet earth and old secrets. She stepped carefully, her boots crunching over fragments of glass. Then she saw it, carved into one of the remaining fence posts, faint but visible, EV plus CB 1985. Her radio crackled. Detective Morales, came a voice. "You might want to sit down. Amarillo just called back." She didn't sit. "Go ahead." "The DNA from the 1997 fire doesn't match Edward Vaughn." Her stomach dropped. "The body was never his. The static hissed for a long moment before the voice returned. Whoever that was, Vaughn's file lists him as unidentified male mid-30s. The burn pattern suggests accelerant use. Someone wanted that body to be him. Lena looked up at the empty horizon. The wind pressed through the grass like a whisper. Vaughn had staged his own death. And now, 40 years later, he was still out there. She drove back to the station, rain slapping the windshield, her mind racing. Every puzzle piece she thought she'd placed was now splintered. Roy's confession wasn't closure, it was a breadcrumb, a message left by a man haunted by someone who refused to die. In the office, she spread the evidence across her desk, the 1985 photos, the old witness statement, the new keychain, the burned autopsy file. Vaughn's name was everywhere, threading through 4 decades of silence. But there was something else, something hidden in plain sight. She zoomed in on the photo she'd found in Roy's box, the group at the auto shop grinning for the camera. Behind them, a whiteboard scrawled with the date June 10th, 1985, 1 week before Caroline disappeared. And, just visible on the far right edge, someone else half cut out of frame wearing a sheriff's badge. Lena froze. The sheriff back then was Dale Henson, the same man who'd run the original investigation, the same man who'd declared the case unsolvable in 1990. She stared at the photo bile rising in her throat. If Vaughn was alive, someone had helped him vanish, someone who'd known how to bury evidence and sign death certificates. She picked up the phone. "This is Detective Morales. I need to locate former Sheriff Henson. Last known address." The dispatcher hesitated. He passed away in 2011. Lena's pulse spiked. Any surviving relatives? Just one, a son Deputy Alan Henson, currently serving in Fort Worth PD. She hung up slowly. The connections were tightening like a noose. That night, she met Alan at a diner just off the interstate. The rain hadn't stopped. Neon lights reflected off the puddles like veins of color. Alan looked uneasy, early 40s, polite his father's eyes behind tired lids. "I appreciate you meeting me," Lena said. "I'm reopening a case your father worked in, 85, the Caroline Baker disappearance." Alan sighed. "That one again, I was a kid, but I remember. It broke him." She slid a photo across the table, the group shot from the auto shop. "You recognize anyone?" He leaned in. "That's Vaughn. Right. Worked for my dad's friend. He died in a fire, didn't he?" Lena watched his face carefully. "That's what the records say, but we have reason to believe he faked it. Your father's name shows up in the same file, his signature approving the death certificate." Alan's expression hardened. "Are you saying my father was involved?" "I'm saying your father may have helped a killer disappear." The silence between them deepened. Outside, thunder rolled like distant gunfire. Alan rubbed his temples. "You don't know what it was like back then. My father... He wasn't the same after that summer. He'd sit up at night muttering about the girl by the river. One time he said, 'It should have been Vaughn, not her.'" Lena leaned closer. "What do you mean?" Alan swallowed. "He said Eddie had something on him, something that could ruin everything. After the case went cold, Dad got paranoid, started locking the garage, burning boxes of files. When he died, I found one box left in the attic. But I didn't open it." Lena's heartbeat quickened. "Do you still have it?" Alan hesitated, then nodded. "It's in my house. I'll bring it to you tomorrow." But tomorrow would come too late. That night, a fire broke out in Alan Henson's home. Neighbors saw the flames from half a mile away. By the time firefighters arrived, the structure was gone. Alan's body was found near the basement, charred beyond recognition. The coroner's report would later note something strange, no smoke in the lungs. He'd been dead before the fire started. And buried beneath the ashes, investigators found a half-melted piece of metal, a riverboat keychain. This one engraved AH 2025. Lena stood in the rubble as the dawn broke over the horizon, the smell of burned wood thick in her throat. The press would call it coincidence, but she knew better. Eddie Vaughn wasn't dead. He was watching. And somewhere in the silence of the Texas plains, the man who'd escaped death once was writing a new story, one fire at a time. The fire at Alan Henson's house burned through more than timber and walls. It burned through the illusion that the past was dead. The flames licked away the last thin layer of safety that separated Detective Lena Morales from the truth, and when the smoke cleared, there was nothing left but the metallic stink of gasoline and fear. She stood in the wreckage as the fire crews packed up dawn, creeping over the horizon, turning the ash into something that looked like snow. Everywhere she looked, there were fragments, pieces of glass-scorched photo frames, a half-melted badge, but one thing was unmistakable, the keychain. That riverboat shape again glinting faintly under a blanket of soot engraved with the initials AH 2025. The third one, 3 lives, 3 decades, 3 fires. Lena crouched gloved hands trembling as she lifted the metal. It was still warm, the same design, the same engraving style. Whoever made them wanted her to know it was connected. A message. Or a threat. When she turned it over, she saw something new, a tiny number etched along the rim IV, 4. Her heart pounded. The next one would come soon. She drove back to the station, rain starting again, heavy and relentless. The highway shimmered under flashing blue lights. She didn't speak to anyone. The crime scene photographer snapped pictures of the keychain, but Lena didn't wait for the report. She needed to think alone in the dark. At her desk, she laid out the evidence: Caroline Baker's file, Roy Ellison's confession, Eddie Vaughn's fake death, the photo of Sheriff Henson. The pattern was there, coiled like a snake between the lines. The Baker case wasn't a single crime. It was a chain forged by men who thought they could bury their sins under dirt and fire. She began tracing records, property transfers, old arrest logs, badge numbers from the 1980s. Sheriff Henson's name appeared again, linked to a warehouse seized in 1984 after a smuggling investigation. The warehouse had later been sold to Edward Vaughn. Lena stared at the screen. Jesus, she whispered. The address was still active, registered to a false company, Red River Salvage, in the outskirts of Fort Worth. No tax filings in over 20 years, a perfect place to disappear. She grabbed her jacket and left. By the time she reached the warehouse, the rain had turned to fog. The air was thick and heavy, every sound swallowed before it reached the ear. The building loomed ahead, corrugated metal rust streaks running down the walls like blood. Her flashlight beam caught a sign barely hanging from one hinge, no trespassing. She pushed the door open. It groaned like a dying animal. Inside, the air was damp and cold. Dust floated like ghosts. Old tools hung from the walls, and in the center of the room sat something she didn't expect: a table. On it, a single riverboat keychain, this one blank, no initials. She approached slowly. The floor creaked beneath her boots. As she reached the table, she noticed the walls behind it were covered with photographs, hundreds of them. Faces of women, newspaper clippings, missing persons posters from all across Texas. Every photo had been marked with a black X, except one, Caroline Baker's. Pinned beside her was a recent news article, "Cold Case Solved, Texas Man Confesses After 40 Years." And below it, written in shaky ink, "You think you found me, but I never left." Lena's hand went to her gun. The silence around her changed, no longer empty, but watching. Then she heard it. A sound from the far corner. Slow footsteps, metal scraping against concrete. "Vaughn?" Her voice was low-controlled. The sound stopped. Then a man's voice, old but steady, came from the shadows. "You shouldn't have come here alone, detective." Her pulse spiked. "Show yourself." The figure stepped forward, gray hair, weathered face, eyes like dark glass. He was thinner than the photos, but unmistakable. Eddie Vaughn. He smiled faintly. "You're late." Lena raised her weapon. "You're supposed to be dead." "So are a lot of people," he said. "But death is just paperwork if you know the right sheriff." He moved closer, his boots echoing softly. "You want to know what happened to Caroline? You want to know what really started all this?" "I already do," she said. "You killed her." He shook his head. "No. I didn't kill her. I buried her, yes. But your precious Sheriff Dale Henson, he's the one who pulled the trigger." The words hit like a physical blow. Lena's mind reeled. "You're lying." Vaughn chuckled softly. He wanted her gone. She saw something she wasn't supposed to: a shipment coming through Denton Creek one night before the 4th of July. Cocaine, cash, everything. She worked part-time at the diner where his men met. She overheard. He panicked. Thought she'd talk. Lena's hand trembled slightly on the gun, "And you helped him cover it up." "I owed him," Vaughn said. "He got me out of prison in '83. Said I'd be free if I made a body disappear. But the thing about favors, detective, they never end. Not for people like him, or like me. He stepped closer. When he died, I thought I was free. But then his boy found the files? You met him, didn't you, Alan? Her throat tightened. You killed him. He was going to burn the wrong things, Vaughn said quietly. The past isn't supposed to die with men like me. It's supposed to remind you that the system you serve, the one you think is clean, was built on dirt. He turned away, walking to the wall of photos. All these women, all these cases. No one cared until one of them had a badge. And even then, they didn't care for the truth. They cared for headlines. Why the keychains, Lena demanded. Vaughn smiled. Caroline loved the river, said she wanted to sail away from this town. I made her one before that night. Afterward, it became tradition, a way to mark what was owed. He reached into his pocket and tossed something at her feet. It landed with a metallic clink. Another keychain, this one engraved LM 2025. Her blood froze. You're next, he said. Lena lunged forward, but Vaughn moved faster. He vanished into the fog like a shadow slipping beneath water. The sound of a door slamming echoed through the warehouse, followed by the low growl of an engine. By the time she reached the exit, all that was left was tire tracks cutting into the mud. The silence afterward was deafening. She stood there, soaked, shaking, holding the keychain with her initials. The number etched into the rim this time was V5. The fourth fire hadn't happened yet, but the fifth name was already chosen, hers. As dawn crept in through the broken windows, Lena realized she was no longer chasing a suspect. She was part of his story now. And Vaughn was writing the ending. The rain hadn't stopped for 3 days. Texas storms had a way of swallowing whole towns, and now Denton Creek was drowning under its own ghosts. The fire at Alan Henson's house was ruled electrical malfunction, but no one in the department believed that. They just didn't want to admit the truth, that the man they'd buried 40 years ago was alive hunting the living like it was all part of the same unfinished sentence. Detective Lena Morales hadn't gone home since the warehouse. The keychain with her initials LM 2025 sat on her desk under the glow of a single lamp, the metal reflecting every sleepless hour. She'd replayed his words in her head 100 times. You're next. The sentence wasn't a threat anymore, it was a countdown. The department wanted her off the case. They called it conflict of interest. She called it fear. The captain said she was too close, too compromised. She said she was the only one who understood what Vaughn wanted. When they suspended her badge, she didn't even argue. She just walked out, rain slicing across her coat, the streets echoing with the sound of thunder and memory. She drove south toward the Red River border, where Vaughn had once owned that salvage yard. Her gut told her he wouldn't run far. Men like him didn't disappear. They circled back, feeding off the ashes they left behind. And every fire he started pointed somewhere new like a compass, spinning in reverse. The first was the nursing home. 2 nights after her suspension, it burned. No survivors. Roy Ellison's body was found in his bed, hands folded, eyes open. The coroner said he died before the flames reached him. Another fire. Another silence. And when they cleared the rubble, the firefighters found something small. Beside his remains a riverboat keychain. Read 2025. Lena clenched the report until the paper tore. Vaughn wasn't hiding. He was erasing the past one witness at a time. She traced the pattern, Denton Creek, Fort Worth, Amarillo, all points forming a rough triangle across North Texas. Each location was tied to someone from 1985, someone connected to Caroline Baker's disappearance. The next corner of the triangle pointed east toward a town called Bridge Hollow, a place most maps didn't even bother naming anymore. At dawn, she was there. The fog was thick, the streets empty. Abandoned gas stations, boarded motels, telephone poles leaning like tired soldiers. Only one building still had light, an old diner, its neon sign sputtering open in the gray morning. She pushed through the door. The bell above it gave a weak jingle. Inside, the air smelled of burnt coffee and rain-soaked wood. A waitress with gray hair and red lipstick looked up from wiping the counter. "Morning," she said, voice rough. "You're early. Storm chase or running from something?" Both, Lena said quietly, sliding into a booth. "You've lived here long. Long enough to know the ghosts by name." Lena pulled a photo from her jacket, Vaughn's mugshot from 1983. You ever seen this man? The waitress froze. For a split second, her eyes flicked toward the back door. Who's asking? Detective Morales, off duty. The woman's hands shook slightly. He came through a few weeks ago, sat right there where you're sitting, ordered black coffee and pecan pie, said he was waiting for someone. Did he meet anyone? The waitress hesitated. A girl, young, early 20s, blonde hair wearing scrubs, looked tired. He called her sweetheart. She didn't look like she knew him, but she didn't walk away either, left together after 10 minutes. Lena's stomach turned. You hear her name. The woman nodded. She paid with a credit card. I keep the receipts. Small towns don't waste paper. She reached under the register and handed Lena a slip. The name on it stopped her breath. Rebecca Vaughn. Daughter, or something worse. Lena walked out of the diner, the rain easing into mist. She dialed the state database. Run a Rebecca Vaughn, mid-20s medical field, last known address in Texas. A pause, then the operator's voice quiet. Rebecca Vaughn, RN, at Trinity Hospital, Dallas. Missing since April. Last seen leaving her shift, with an older male believed to be family. Lena stared at the horizon. Vaughn wasn't working alone. He was building something, passing something on. By nightfall, she was back on the highway. The wind screaming through the gaps in the window. She kept replaying the diner footage in her head, imagining that meeting Vaughn sitting across from his daughter, explaining the legacy of fire, the cleansing of the past. Maybe she was the next torchbearer. Maybe that's why he'd left the V on the keychain. Hours later, her phone buzzed a blocked number. She answered. A voice soft female, Detective Morales. Her grip tightened on the wheel. Who is this? I think you know, the woman said. My father says you're the only one who ever really looked. Rebecca. Silence. Then he says you're like her, like Caroline. Lena's pulse spiked. Where are you? I wanted to see you, the voice whispered, before he finishes it. Finishes what? A low hum in the background machinery, maybe a generator. Then a click. The call ended. Lena's GPS blinked erratically, the signal dying somewhere between Denton and Bridge Hollow. She followed instinct driving until the highway turned to gravel, then dirt. The world narrowed to the reach of her headlights. And then she saw it, another fire blooming against the horizon. She floored the accelerator. When she reached the clearing, the air shimmered with heat. An old trailer was engulfed in flames, the metal popping as it collapsed inward. The stench of diesel was everywhere. Fire crews hadn't even arrived yet. She grabbed her flashlight, pushing toward the blaze, coughing through the smoke. A figure stood by the tree line, motionless. Rebecca, she shouted. The figure turned, not the old man, but the girl from the diner. Blonde hair matted with rain eyes, wide, reflecting the fire like two mirrors. She didn't run. Lena stopped a few feet away. Where is he? Rebecca's voice trembled. Gone. He said it's almost done. Why the fires, Rebecca? Why the keychains? Tears mixed with soot on her face. He says it's penance. Every one of them part of the circle. 4 who knew, and 1 who'll understand. Lena's throat tightened. 1 who'll understand what... The girl reached into her pocket and pulled something small. A riverboat keychain. This one engraved RV 2025. She dropped it into Lena's hand. He said to give you this. The heat from the burning trailer washed over them. Lena stepped closer. Rebecca, you need to come with me. He's using you. Rebecca shook her head slowly. No, he saved me. Saved you from what? From becoming her. Before Lena could speak, Rebecca took a step back into the firelight. He said, the circle ends tonight. Then she turned and ran straight toward the flames. Lena screamed, lunging forward, but the heat drove her back. The explosion came seconds later, a deep concussive roar that threw her into the dirt. When she looked up, the trailer was gone, a pillar of fire twisting into the sky. The next morning, firefighters found no trace of Rebecca Vaughn's body. Only a set of footprints leading away from the wreck, smaller than Lena's, burned into the wet soil heading toward the river. And among the ashes, the investigators found one final piece of metal, the same riverboat shape edges blackened by heat. Engraved on the back, a single line in small, careful letters. End of Circle DC, 1985. Denton Creek, the place it all began. Lena stood there as the wind picked up the sound of distant thunder crawling closer again. She knew what Vaughn meant. He wanted her back at the creek, where Caroline's bones had slept, where the earth still whispered the truth no one wanted to hear. The case wasn't over, it was never over. And this time, the fire was coming for her. The sky over Denton Creek was the color of ash. The storms had passed, but the air still hummed like something waiting to strike. Detective Lena Morales stood by the riverbank where the first search party had ended 4 decades earlier. The cottonwood trees leaned toward the water, their branches skeletal, their roots clutching the mud like bones, refusing to let go. She'd come alone. She had to. The fire reports said Rebecca Vaughn was gone. Another ghost added to the circle. But Lena didn't believe in ghosts. She believed in patterns, and the last one ended here. The inscription on the keychain had said it plainly. End of Circle, D.C., 1985. She stepped through the tall grass flashlight, sweeping over the ground, slick with rain. Every sound seemed amplified, the crunch of her boots, the sigh of the river, the low drone of cicadas hiding in the dark. Somewhere beyond the trees, thunder muttered like an old secret. Her phone buzzed once, no service. Of course, the town's edges had always swallowed signal and sense. The case had started here. It wanted to end here. She followed the old path to where Caroline Baker's truck had been found. The road was just a scar now overgrown and broken. But the smell-wet soil rust decay felt exactly like the files had described. She could almost hear the echo of distant sirens from 1985, the first responders shouting into the dawn. Then she saw it, a flicker of light between the trees. Not fire, something smaller, steadier, a lantern swaying gently. Lena drew her weapon and moved closer, each step deliberate. The beam of her flashlight caught a silhouette, a man standing by the old well hat, pulled low coat hanging heavy with rain. Vaughn. He didn't turn. You came. Where's Rebecca? She's safe, he said softly. Safer than any of us ever were. Lena took another step. You lied. You killed her. Vaughn chuckled low and broken. You really think I'd let my own blood burn? You saw what she left you. The keychain. He nodded. Every mark, every name, none of it random. They were the ones who helped bury the truth. Each fire was just accounting. And what's mine, she asked. You're the ledger's end. He turned now, the lantern's glow cutting across his face, lined, hollow-eyed, older than time. You came to finish this, he said. But you don't know what you're standing on. He gestured to the ground around the well. That's not where we buried her detective. That's where we buried them. Lena frowned. Them, the sheriff, his deputy, 2 men from the shipment crew. Henson didn't want witnesses. Said if the ground held more than one secret, nobody would know which one to dig for. The air thickened. Lena felt her throat tighten. You're saying there are other bodies here? 6, Vaughn said, including the sheriff's deputy. He tried to turn on him. Got a bullet instead. You expect me to believe you? Vaughn smiled faintly. Believe what you can dig. He dropped the lantern. It hit the mud flame, flaring up before dying in the damp air. Then he stepped back. You think you've been hunting me, Morales, but you've been walking the same trail she did every mile planned before you were even born. Lena kept the gun leveled. Why me? Because you were supposed to find her, he said. Your father was one of Henson's men. The words sliced through her like glass. You're lying. Check your birth certificate, he said quietly. Different county, different name. You came to Denton Creek chasing ghosts, but this is where your bloodline started to rot. The ground seemed to shift under her feet. She wanted to deny it, to call him insane, but something deep inside whispered he wasn't wrong. Her father had never talked about 1985. He'd left Texas when she was a child, never explaining why. You've had 40 years to repent, she said, voice cracking. Now you're going to tell the world what you did. Vaughn stepped closer until the gun was almost against his chest. You still don't get it. The world doesn't care. You arrest me, they'll bury the story again. You kill me, they'll call it justice. Either way, the circle closes. Behind him, the ground gave a soft groan like the earth exhaling. Water bubbled up from the cracks near the well, thick and dark. The rain had loosened the soil. Something metallic glinted beneath the surface. Lena risked a glance just long enough. Vaughn moved. The gun went off, the sound exploding across the river. He slammed into her, both of them crashing into the mud. The weapons skidded away. They struggled fists, slipping in the wet dirt. He was strong despite his age, driven by something colder than adrenaline. She caught his wrist, felt the edge of a blade flash past her face. The cut burned shallow, but real. You can't kill what's already dead, he hissed. Lena drove her knee into his ribs, twisted, grabbed the gun. One motion, a single shot. Vaughn fell back, gasping, mud seeping into his coat. The rain began again, heavy and relentless, washing the blood into the soil. He laughed once, coughing. You finally closed it. But then his hand lifted weakly, pointing toward the well. Look. Lena turned. The water at the bottom was boiling, not from heat, but from the rising current. The rain had swollen the river, flooding the underground channels. The earth gave another moan, deeper now. Cracks split through the ground like lightning. Move, she shouted, scrambling to her feet. Vaughn didn't move. He just smiled the same hollow smile from the photograph decades ago. She's still down there, he whispered. She never left. The ground collapsed. Lena dove aside as the well caved in the lantern light, swallowed by darkness. The roar of rushing water drowned everything. When it stopped, the clearing was gone, replaced by a jagged sinkhole, black and steaming. Vaughn's body had vanished into it. She lay there for a long moment, breathing hard, the rain cooling the sweat on her face. The air smelled of iron and mud and endings. By sunrise, the first responders had arrived. They found her kneeling by the crater, soaked silent. The captain tried to speak, but she didn't hear him. All she could see was the churned soil where Vaughn had stood and the glint of something small caught in the debris. A keychain, riverboat shape. This one blank, no initials, no number. She picked it up, turned it in her hand. The engraving on the back read only, "Circle closed." For a moment she thought she heard the faint rush of the river again like a sigh. The air was still. The rain had stopped. But as she walked away, the camera flashes lit the scene and one of the techs shouted from the edge of the sinkhole. "Detective, you'll want to see this." She turned back. He was holding something, an old badge, rusted and worn. The lettering barely visible, but enough to read Morales Denton County Deputy. Her father's name. The circle hadn't closed after all. The river had swallowed Eddie Vaughn, but it hadn't taken the truth with him. When the rescue crews left and the sirens faded into the wet horizon, Detective Lena Morales stayed behind. The hole where the well had been gaped open like a mouth that had finally spoken, and the badge they'd lifted from the mud lay heavy in her hand. Deputy Daniel Morales, Denton County Sheriff's Office. Her father's name, her family's blood stamped into the soil she'd been trying to cleanse. For hours, she sat in her car engine off rain, ticking against the windshield. Every memory she had of him came back now twisted. The long drives where he refused to talk about work, the nights he'd flinch at fireworks, the drawer he always kept locked. She'd called him a hero when she joined the force. Now she wasn't sure what he'd been protecting. At dawn, she drove to the old Morales house, what was left of it. The place had been empty for years, abandoned after his death in 2002. Dust covered everything. The wallpaper peeled like old skin. She went straight to his study. The drawer that had once resisted her opened easily this time, wood-swollen by humidity. Inside were police reports, photos, a single cassette tape labeled July 85. She slid it into the recorder. Static. Then her father's voice, younger strained. "Sheriff Henson says it's done. The girl's gone. Vaughn's handling the cleanup. God forgive us. We didn't mean for it to happen this way." A second voice, Henson's, cut in rough and cold. "You talk Danny and you'll join her. We clear this or none of us walk." Then silence. Lena sat frozen. The air seemed thinner, harder to breathe. Her father hadn't been an accomplice. He'd been a prisoner inside the same circle, dragged into it and sealed there. She replayed the tape. There was a faint sound beneath the voice's metal chains, water dripping, and a woman's voice whispering, barely audible. "Please, don't." She turned the volume up. The whisper came again, followed by a thud and the splash of water. Her stomach knotted. Caroline Baker hadn't died on land. She'd been thrown alive into the creek. The realization hit like a slap. Every file, every theory, every confession wrong. They hadn't shot her, they'd drowned her. Lena grabbed the keys tape still spinning and headed back toward town. The road blurred under the morning fog, but she knew where she was going, the archives. The old evidence storage beneath the courthouse had been sealed for years after a flood, but she still had a backdoor code from her early days. The metal gate shrieked open. The air inside was damp and stale. Rows of boxes stretched into the dark, each labeled by year. She found 1985 Baker C. She'd seen it before, but this time she was searching for something else. The chain of custody. The signatures. And there it was. At the bottom of the log, the name D. Morales, written in trembling ink, signing out an item that was never logged back in. Item hash 47 River Evidence, clothing fragment. The missing evidence. Her father had taken it. A sudden noise behind her made her turn. Footsteps. She drew her gun flashlight beam, slicing the dark. Who's there? No answer. Just the soft drip of water from the ceiling. She moved between the shelves, breath-tight light bouncing off boxes, then a voice behind her, low and close. You shouldn't dig where the ground still bleeds. She spun, gun raised, but there was no one, only the sound of her own pulse. The light flickered once, twice, then steadied. Her mind played tricks. Or maybe not. Vaughn's body was gone. The river could have carried him, or something else could have. She didn't know anymore which part of the story was finished. She grabbed the box and left. Back at the motel, she spread the files on the bed, listening again to the tape. The whisper, the splash, the silence. She slowed, the audio filtered the static on her laptop. Beneath the noise, a new sound emerged, a voice murmuring coordinates. Not words, numbers. 33.21 minus 97.08. She entered them into the map. The pin dropped just half a mile from where Caroline's truck had been found in the bend of the creek near an abandoned grain silo. She drove there before sunset. The road was narrow-lined with dead trees. The silo rose from the earth like a tomb, its metal sides streaked with rust. Inside, the air smelled of oil and rot. Birds fluttered out as she entered their wings, echoing like ghosts escaping a cage. In the center of the floor was a hatch, padlocked, half buried in mud. She kicked it open. Beneath a ladder, descended into darkness. The first thing she noticed was the sound of water, slow, steady dripping from the concrete walls. The beam of her flashlight revealed a narrow tunnel carved beneath the silo leading toward the creek. Halfway down, something glittered in the mud. She crouched and picked it up. A badge Sheriff Dale Henson's, tarnished but whole. Next to it, a piece of fabric, red frayed, familiar. Caroline's dress. The tunnel widened into a small chamber. The water pooled knee-deep. In the center, half submerged, a wooden crate. She pried it open. Inside were bones wrapped in plastic, and on top of them a photograph. Her father and Caroline Baker. She stared at it, disbelief curdling into dread. He was smiling, arm around her shoulders. The handwriting on the back said, "For Danny, the one who tried to save me." Lena's throat closed. He hadn't been part of her death. He'd tried to stop it. He'd taken the evidence to protect her memory, not to hide it. And then, in the corner of the chamber, she saw movement, a flicker of reflection in the water. She turned her light. A face. For an instant, she saw it. Caroline's pale and impossibly clear, beneath the surface eyes, open hair drifting like river grass. Then the current shifted and she was gone, leaving only ripples that reached the edges of the pool. Lena stumbled back, shaking the beam, trembling in her hand. A voice echoed softly through the tunnel, not a whisper, a recording. Her father's again distorted through an old speaker. "If you're hearing this, mija, then the circle found you too. Don't let it take you. End it where it began." The speaker clicked off. Silence fell. Above her, thunder rolled. The river outside was rising again, flooding back through the tunnel. She climbed fast water, surging at her feet. By the time she reached the surface, the hatch blew open. Water spilling into the silo like the past reclaiming its own. She stood in the rain chest, heaving, watching as the building groaned and caved inward. The flood swallowed it whole, carrying the bones, the crate, the evidence into the creek once more. The circle was fighting to stay closed. When the rain finally stopped, the sun broke weakly through the clouds. Lena walked back to her car, soaked and shaking. On the passenger seat, the blank keychain gleamed faintly in the light. She turned it over again. Now, beneath the engraving circle closed, new letters had appeared, etched by rust or by something else. "Find the truth before it drowns." She closed her fist around it. Her father had tried. Caroline had tried. Now it was her turn. As the camera of the mind pulls back, Denton Creek lies quiet again, mud settling current, slowing, waiting for the next storm to unearth what's left of the truth. The rain had stopped, but the sky stayed the color of smoke. The floodwater pulled back, leaving the bones of Denton Creek exposed again. Detective Lena Morales sat in her car outside the sheriff's office, the blank keychain resting on the dashboard. The words that had appeared the night before, "Find the truth before it drowns," seemed to pulse in the morning light. She was out of leads, out of witnesses, out of time, but she wasn't out of questions. Inside the sheriff's archives, she found the one box no one had touched: Henson. Operations, 1984 to 1986. It wasn't cataloged under homicide. It was labeled narcotics. She opened it and stared at shipping manifests maps marked with red grease pencil ledger books filled with initials. In the margins, the same hand had written 3 letters over and over again: RRC, Red River Consortium. It wasn't a police unit, it was a front. Denton Creek had been one stop on a smuggling route that ran from the Mexican border up through Oklahoma. The creek wasn't just a crime scene, it was a corridor. Sheriff Henson and his deputies had protected those runs moving cocaine and cash through the back roads. Caroline Baker hadn't been a random victim. She'd been a witness. Lena flipped through the manifests until one name hit like a hammer: Carl Whitman, Logistics Manager, Red River Freight. A signature from 1985 matched the shipping slips stacked in the box. She searched the state database. Whitman was still alive, retired in San Antonio address, listed under a ranch property. She drove through the night. By dawn, she was pulling onto a long gravel driveway, the sun rising behind her like a slow warning. The ranch looked abandoned. Windows, boarded gate padlocked, but fresh tire tracks cut through the mud. She climbed the fence gun holstered, but ready. Inside, dust floated in the beams of early light. A generator hummed somewhere deep in the barn, and on a workbench, something waited for her: a single riverboat keychain, this one engraved CW 1985. She felt the air shift before she heard the voice. "Didn't think anyone would find me." Whitman stepped from the shadows, a shotgun hanging loose in his hands. Gray beard, cold eyes. "You Morales' girl?" he asked. "Yes," she said. He gave a crooked smile. "Knew your daddy. Good man. Didn't belong in that mess. You were part of it." He shrugged. "We all were. Henson ran the route, Vaughn handled muscle. Your old man drove escort, once didn't know what he was protecting until it was too late. When the girl saw too much, Henson panicked, told Vaughn to shut her up. Your father tried to pull her out. Got beat for it. That's the truth." Lena's throat tightened. "And you let it happen." Whitman looked at her weary. "You think you're the first Morales to chase ghosts?" "He came here, same as you. Said he'd tell the feds. I warned him Henson had reach. 2 weeks later, he's dead in a staged car crash, and now you're standing in the same spot thinking the river can wash blood clean." He set the shotgun down. "You want proof? In that cabinet. Ledgers there. Every name, every payment, every shipment." She moved cautiously, opened the cabinet. Inside were 3 ledgers bound in cracked leather. The first 2 were brittle faded. The third looked newer pages, unyellowed. She flipped it open and froze. The last entry was dated April 2025. The handwriting wasn't Henson's. It was Vaughn's. And, below his signature, "Transfer complete successor confirmed." "Who's the successor?" she demanded. Whitman hesitated. "Someone close to you. Someone already inside." Lena's pulse hammered. "Say the name." He exhaled. "Captain Ryder. Her commanding officer, the one who'd suspended her." She felt the room tilt. All this time, the circle hadn't been history. It had been management. The Red River Consortium never died. It evolved. Ryder had inherited it, using the cold case reopening as cover to erase old liabilities. Roy Ellison, Alan Henson, Rebecca Vaughn. Every one of them a loose thread tied off in fire. Lena turned, but Whitman was already raising the shotgun again. "You weren't supposed to see that," he said quietly. She dove behind the bench as the blast ripped through the air. Splinters exploded around her. She crawled sideways, grabbed a rusted wrench, and hurled it. It struck his shoulder. The gun fired wide. She rushed him the recoil, throwing him off balance. They crashed into the workbench, the shotgun clattering away. "Your father was right," he wheezed, trying to reach for a knife. "Some truths ain't meant to live." She drove her elbow into his jaw, heard the crack, and wrestled the knife free. Then I'll make them die louder. Whitman slumped breath, shallow blood soaking his shirt. Too late. Ryder's already cleaning house. You're next. Lena pressed a hand to the wound. Where is he? He coughed, smiling through the blood. Denton Creek. Always Denton Creek. The words died with him. By the time she staggered outside, sirens were already screaming in the distance. She didn't call them. She didn't need to. Ryder had men everywhere. She burned the ranch before she left Ledger's files, everything. The flames swallowed 40 years of rot. In the glow, she saw something gleam on the dirt, another riverboat keychain. She picked it up, turning it in the light. The engraving read, DM 1985, her father's. She slipped it into her pocket and drove north, back to Denton Creek. The town looked the same quiet and suspicious, like it knew what she was bringing back. At the edge of the water, the police tape from the last dig still fluttered in the wind. Her phone rang. Blocked number. She answered. A familiar voice. Calm. Authority threaded with threat. Detective Morales, you should have stayed suspended. Captain Ryder, you have something that belongs to me. You mean my father's life? A pause, then. He made his choice. You'll make yours. Click. Lena stood there staring at the creek, her reflection rippling in the black water. The circle was no longer a secret. It was alive, wearing uniforms, signing budgets, investigating itself. Vaughn had been the monster they'd fed to the fire. Ryder was the man who built the altar. She reached into her pocket and pulled out both keychains, the blank one and her father's. The metal was cold heavy with memory. She tossed them into the creek. They sank without a sound. The ripples spread outward, slow and perfect, until they touched the banks and disappeared. Then headlights appeared on the ridge above 3 vehicles moving in formation. Ryder's voice echoed in her memory. You'll make your choice. She chambered around rain beginning to fall again, slow and hard. She whispered to the darkness. Then let's end it where it began. As the engines roared closer, the screen of her mind filled with that same flash of red from the old photos, the color of Caroline Baker's dress. Somewhere under the ground, the river shifted, hungry for another secret. The storm was back, and this time it wasn't leaving. Rain drummed on the roof of the cruiser like the ticking of a clock counting down. The storm had returned to Denton Creek, and with it came everything the past had buried: corruption, guilt, blood. Detective Lena Morales watched the headlights slide through the darkness. 3 vehicles forming a slow, methodical triangle around her car. There was no escape. She cut the engine. The only sound now was rain and thunder, 2 old voices arguing in the sky. The door of the first vehicle opened. Captain Ryder stepped out, hat brim, low coat, snapping in the wind. He wasn't holding a weapon yet. He didn't need to. Men like him let the world draw its own conclusions before they pulled the trigger. Evening, Morales. He called, voice almost casual. You've had a long drive? Lena opened her door and stepped into the mud. The rain soaked her hair, her jacket, her badge. She didn't raise her gun. Not yet. You picked the wrong place for a reunion. Ryder smiled faintly. I thought you might appreciate the symmetry. Behind him, the other 2 vehicles idled. She could make out shapes inside, men in tactical gear, faceless behind the glass. They were waiting for a signal. Lena's boots sank deeper into the dirt. I know about the consortium, she said. I know what you've been doing with the cold case division, using it to erase old witnesses, burn the files, clean the trail. Ryder's smile never moved. Then you know why I can't let you leave. You killed my father. He tilted his head. Your father killed himself. He made his choice, same as you're about to. The wind tore through the trees, bending them like prayers. Lena took 1 slow step forward. You want to close the circle, fine, but it ends with me. Ryder nodded once, almost respectfully. Then let's finish what your father started. He drew his gun. The first shot cracked across the water. Lena dropped to her knees behind the cruiser door, mud splattering her face. Another shot. Metal screamed as the mirror shattered. She rolled, fired back. The flash lit the trees, brief, blinding, biblical. Ryder's men fanned out, moving through the brush. 3 beams of light cut the rain like knives. She could hear their boots, heavy and deliberate. She ran toward the creek, bullets tearing through branches around her. The ground was slick, the mud sucking at her heels. She dove behind a fallen log and reloaded, heart pounding in her throat. Lightning forked across the sky, turning the world white for a second, and in that second, she saw them. Two men flanking left, one circling wide. Ryder staying still methodical, his gun aimed where he knew she'd move next. She waited, rain dripping from her lashes, counting heartbeats. 1, 2, 3. Then she threw a rock into the dark. It hit water 20 feet away. Gunfire answered 3 quick bursts. She moved opposite, came up behind the left flank. 1 shot. The man went down. She grabbed his rifle, turned, fired at the second silhouette. Silence, then a body hitting the mud. Ryder didn't move. He just laughed, a low, bitter sound that carried through the storm. "You sound just like him," he said. "Your old man? Thought he could fix things with bullets." She shouted back, "He tried to fix what you broke. Maybe. But he never learned the rule. You can't clean blood with more blood." She stood slowly, rifle raised, lightning framing her in white light. "You think I want clean? I just want it to stop." Ryder took a step forward, gun steady, then pull the trigger. The moment hung between them, 2 silhouettes against the rain history vibrating in the thunder. She could see his eyes now calm, clear, the kind of eyes that had watched people die and called it procedure. Then she noticed something behind him, the creek rising fast, swollen with the storm spilling over its banks. The ground trembled as water tore through the dirt, devouring the same stretch of earth where Caroline Baker's truck had been found 40 years earlier. Ryder turned to look. That was enough. Lena fired. The bullet hit his shoulder, spinning him sideways. His gun fell, vanishing into the mud. He staggered, but didn't fall. He laughed again, coughing blood. "You think this changes anything?" he said. "There'll always be another circle." She walked toward him, weapon still aimed. "Not this one." He stared past her, eyes unfocused. "You still don't get it. Denton Creek isn't a place, it's a vein. Everything that ran through it, drugs, money, bodies, it never stopped. It just moved underground." Lightning struck nearby, the sound like the sky ripping open. The bank gave way beneath Ryder's feet. He slipped, caught himself on a branch, mud collapsing around him. Lena reached out. Reflex. Humanity. She grabbed his wrist. For a heartbeat, they locked eyes, the corrupt captain and the last detective of Denton Creek. Then he smiled one last time. "You should have let it drown." He pulled free. The current took him. She watched the river swallow him whole, his body twisting once before the black water closed. Silence followed. Just rain and the hum of the earth breathing again. When the storm finally broke, the first light of morning crawled across the horizon. The water receded, leaving behind a scar of churned mud and shattered branches. The other vehicles were gone, either fled or washed away. Lena stood alone at the edge of the creek. Her gun hung loosely at her side. The keychain she'd thrown in earlier had washed back up, tangled in roots. She picked it up. This time, the engraving had changed again, faint, almost invisible. "Truth floats." She slipped it into her pocket and looked downstream, where the current carried debris toward the open plain. Somewhere out there, pieces of the old world were finally leaving. In her report, the one she would never file, she would write, "The circle broke at dawn. The river kept its promise." As she walked back toward the highway, the camera of the story would pull wide the town, shrinking the creek, winding like a scar across the landscape. The sound of the storm faded, replaced by the quiet pulse of wind over water. For the first time in 40 years, Denton Creek was silent. But beneath that silence, something still moved, not guilt, not ghosts, but the slow, relentless current of truth rising again, waiting for the next person brave or foolish enough to listen. The morning after the storm, Denton Creek looked like a battlefield. Trees snapped in half. Power lines coiled through the mud like veins. The river ran high and fast, carrying with it the last remains of the night before broken branches, torn roots, and whatever secrets the flood hadn't already stolen. Detective Lena Morales stood at the edge of what had once been the investigation site. The police tape hung in tatters. The sheriff's cruisers were gone, no officers, no rescue crews, no news vans, just her, alone. Her clothes were still damp, her boots sinking into the mud, her sidearm heavy on her hip. She hadn't slept. She hadn't spoken. She'd called for backup hours ago, but no one came. Either they couldn't hear her, or someone made sure they didn't. By noon, she drove back to the city. Her windshield wipers scraped against the dried mud and rain. On the passenger seat sat the keychain, truth floats, and a flash drive she'd found in Ryder's coat pocket before the river took him. Back at headquarters, no one met her eyes. Conversations stopped as she passed. The entire precinct smelled of coffee and disinfectant and fear. Her desk had been cleared. A single envelope lay in its place, administrative leave pending review. She opened it, skimmed the words, then folded it in half and slipped it into her pocket. When she looked up, the captain's office door was closed, blinds drawn. Through the glass, she saw silhouettes, suits, badges, people she didn't recognize, federal probably, or worse. She went home instead. The apartment was quiet, just the hum of the refrigerator and the static hiss of rain against the window. She plugged the flash drive into her laptop. The screen flickered once, then loaded a single folder labeled RRC Archive. Inside were scanned documents, bank transfers, names, judges, sheriffs, businessmen. The consortium wasn't just a local racket, it was statewide, decades deep. There were even signatures from current officials. People who'd shaken her hand at press briefings congratulated her for reopening an old wound. They'd been part of the wound all along. At the bottom of the list, she saw a date, scheduled asset clearance, May 15th, 2025. That was today. She scrolled further. Coordinates, warehouse outside Dallas. The same logistics company her father's reports had mentioned 40 years ago, Red River Freight. Lena stared at the screen. The consortium wasn't dead. Ryder had been just one head of a hydra, still breathing beneath the surface. She closed the laptop and reached for her badge. It felt heavier than it ever had. Not a symbol of justice anymore, but of debt. Her father's debt, the town's, her own. By sunset, she was back on the road. The warehouse sat on the edge of an industrial park, fenced and silent. A red river of dusk bleeding across its corrugated walls. A single light burned above the loading dock. No guards, no cameras. Just an open door that felt too much like an invitation. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the faint metallic tang of fuel. Pallets, stacked high with sealed crates, lined the floor. Some marked equipment, others disposal. She pried one open with her knife. Inside, burned files, melted drives, bones in sealed evidence bags, all tagged with police markers. Every cold case Ryder had reopened, every witness that vanished, every lie sealed in plastic. She turned on her recorder. Detective Lena Morales badge 4172, she said quietly. Entering Red River Freight Dallas, evidence recovered, crimes spanning 1985 to present, file all this, send it somewhere they can't erase it. The recorder blinked red, its tiny light steady as a heartbeat. Then she heard movement. Footsteps echoed behind her, measured deliberate. She spun gun raised. A man stepped into the light. Not Ryder, not Vaughn. Younger, clean suit, calm eyes. "You've done impressive work," he said. "Your father would be proud." "Who are you?" "Public affairs liaison, technically. But you can think of me as continuity." "The consortium isn't an organization anymore, Detective. It's a structure. Systems replace people. Vaughn was chaos. Ryder was control. Now we adapt. You're covering their crimes. We're maintaining stability," he said evenly. "The truth doesn't serve the living if it destroys them." Lena steadied the gun. "You kill to keep the peace." He smiled faintly. "We curate memory. The world needs villains and martyrs. You'll be both." He nodded toward the crates. "You could hand that flash drive to the media, leak it, watch the state implode. Or you could walk away and the river keeps its secrets. Your choice." Lena's hand tightened on the gun. "You think I won't shoot you?" He shook his head. "You're too much like your father. You'll drown yourself trying to pull others out." She fired once. The bullet tore through the wall beside his head. He didn't flinch. He only looked at her, almost pitying, then turned and walked into the shadows. By the time she reached the exit, he was gone. Outside, the storm clouds were gathering again, the air charged, restless. She slipped the flash drive into an evidence bag and sealed it, pressing the recorder to her chest. "Truth floats," she whispered. Then she threw both into the flooded ditch beside the road, watching as they drifted down toward the creek, swallowed by the same current that had taken everyone before her. When she drove away, the first raindrops hit the windshield. The storm followed her north, chasing her through the empty highway. By midnight, she stopped at a rest area overlooking the river. The water shimmered silver under the lightning. Somewhere out there, her father's badge, Vaughn's keychains, Ryder's gun, they were all part of the same current now. She leaned against the railing, listening to the thunder roll across the plains. Her phone buzzed a message from an unknown number. Upload received. She blinked. Another message followed. They'll hear it. All of it. Lena stared at the screen, the rain washing over her face. Somewhere, someone had picked up the signal. Someone had seen the truth before it drowned. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She just stood there, letting the river carry the story where it needed to go. And when the wind rose, carrying the scent of wet earth and gasoline and something like absolution, she whispered into the dark, "It's over." But the creek, restless as ever, whispered back. Nothing ever really ends at Denton Creek. The story hit the airwaves 3 days later, not the way Lena Morales imagined, but close enough to hurt. News anchors called it the Denton Creek Files. Drone shots of the flooded plain rolled under urgent music, followed by grainy images of warehouses, riverbanks, and the rusted outline of the sheriff's star pulled from the mud. No one said her name on record, but everyone knew. They said a source inside law enforcement leaked evidence tying a defunct drug ring to a string of cold case disappearances spanning 40 years. They said internal review is underway. They said federal investigation imminent. The words meant nothing. The screen showed the same rotation of images until the next disaster replaced them. By the 4th day, every phone in Lena's apartment was dead. Someone cut the power. The fuse box was ripped open, wires dangling like veins. She packed what she could fit into a single duffel, clothes, her father's photo, and the keychain she couldn't bring herself to throw away. The rest she left behind. Outside, the world looked clean again. Streets washed by rain headlines drying on paper stands. The storm had passed, and with it, the noise. At the edge of town, she stopped at the diner, the one where Vaughn met his daughter, where everything had started to unravel. The neon sign flickered weakly. Open. Inside, the waitress with the red lipstick was still there. Same lipstick, same weary eyes. "Coffee?" she asked. "Please." The cup hit the counter steaming. "Whole town's talking," the woman said. "They say the creek's cursed, swallowed half the county's sins." Lena stared into the coffee. Maybe it just finally spit them back. The waitress shrugged. "Doesn't change much. Folks'll still lock their doors same as before." She leaned closer. "You leaving?" Lena nodded, thinking about heading west, somewhere dry. "Can't run from water, honey," the woman said, wiping her hands on her apron. "It finds you." Outside, the rain started again. Light, steady, familiar. She drove for hours with no music, no radio, no destination, just the hum of tires and the whisper of the storm behind her. Each mile stretched thinner, quieter, until the world became nothing but highway and horizon. When night fell, she pulled over near the river's edge. Not Denton Creek this time, another branch of the same artery hundreds of miles away. She parked under a bridge engine off the silence thick enough to hear her own pulse. The flash drive had done its job. Reporters were still chasing names. Politicians were still denying everything. The system would twist the story until it fit the shape of what people wanted to believe. But the truth was out there now, floating like driftwood, ugly, undeniable, and free. She reached into her jacket and pulled out the keychain. The metal was cold. The engraving faded. For a second, she thought it said something new, etched by time or rust rest. She closed her hand around it and looked out over the black water. Lightning flickered in the distance, illuminating the ripples. Somewhere far downstream, Denton Creek fed into the same river. Everything flowed back to the same source. In her rearview mirror, blue lights appeared for a moment, then vanished. Not pursuit, not rescue, just ghosts on the highway. She thought of Caroline Baker, of her father, of all the names that would never be spoken on camera. And for the first time, she didn't feel anger, only quiet. She whispered, "You're free now." The wind carried the words across the water. She started the engine headlights, cutting through the rain. The camera of the story would rise now up past the highway, past the river, bending through dark fields, past the town where the tape still fluttered on broken fences. In the distance, the creek gleamed under the stormlight like a scar healing in slow motion. The narrator's voice, hers steady and low, would be the last sound. In 1985, a girl disappeared by the river. In 2025, the river gave her back. The rest, it kept. The rain swallowed the road behind her, washing away the tracks. The flood season came early that year. By late July, Denton Creek had risen again, swollen with the meltwater rolling down from the plains. The town had rebuilt in small ways, new pavement, new fences, but the smell of the river still hung in the air, a damp reminder that nothing washed away completely. They found the first thing at dawn, a fisherman's net snagged on a tree root near the old bridge. Inside was a bone-clean, pale human. By noon, deputies had roped off the area, muttering about erosion and old graves breaking loose. Reporters came for a day, took their photos, and left. The story barely made the back page. But that night, when the county coroner examined the bone, he found something carved along its surface, tiny careful letters etched into the marrow. Find her. No one could explain it. The bone was decades old, but the carving was fresh. Across the state, in the Bordertown Motel, a woman who once wore a badge woke from a dream. Lena Morales sat up, heart pounding. The sound of the river was in her ears again, though the nearest water was miles away. The television on the dresser hummed low news static. No picture. She turned it off. The silence didn't help. She walked to the window. Outside, the desert air shimmered heat lightning flashing far to the north. Every storm still looked like Denton Creek. Every shadow still carried its voice. On the nightstand lay the keychain she swore she'd left in the river. The same riverboat shape, same worn metal. Only now, under the thin motel light, a new engraving cut through the rust. Two left. Her breath caught. She reached for the phone, then stopped. No one to call, no department, no captain, no partner, just ghosts. She slid the keychain into her pocket, grabbed her jacket, and stepped outside. The parking lot was empty, except for a single car, dark old familiar. Parked beneath the flickering sign was a Chevy C10 pickup, red paint, faded to dust. The same model Caroline Baker drove the night she vanished. Lena froze. The keys hung in the ignition. On the passenger seat, something weighted a cassette tape unmarked. She climbed in, hands shaking. The engine started on the first try, coughing once before settling into a low rumble. She slid the tape into the deck. Static. Then a voice, young female, trembling through the distortion. If you hear this, I made it past the creek. Lena's throat tightened. They said the water keeps what it takes, but it gives warnings first. Two left, then it starts again. The tape clicked. End of message. Outside, the storm was rolling south, lightning crawling across the sky like veins of fire. She looked in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see movement, half hoping she wouldn't. Nothing, just darkness. She turned off the engine and sat in the silence, the sound of thunder growing distant. The keychain in her pocket felt warm against her palm, pulsing with the rhythm of her heartbeat. Maybe it was nothing, just memory guilt and ghosts, or maybe the river wasn't done. Back in Denton Creek, the water kept rising through the night. By morning, the marker posts were gone, washed downstream. The current tore at the banks, pulling at the roots of the cottonwood trees. Something metallic glinted beneath the surface for a moment, then disappeared. A badge, a keychain, a piece of the past spinning in the current, waiting for the next storm to bring it back. The river never forgets. It only waits. The river didn't sleep that summer. It crawled through Denton County like a thing alive, whispering beneath bridges, curling around roots, dragging silt and secrets toward the sea. Locals said it changed course after the last flood, that it had carved a new channel through the woods where the old well once stood. But the maps didn't show it, and no one went close enough to check. Then came the boy, 16, skipping school fishing rod over his shoulder. The water was low that week, calm enough to tempt the careless. He waded out where the current met the bend, where the cottonwood trees leaned like old witnesses, and something shiny caught his eye. He reached down, fingers brushing metal. He thought it was a coin until he turned it over and saw the engraving. LM 2025. He didn't know the name, but his mother did. She called the sheriff. By noon, the creek was crawling with uniforms again, same as always. Cameras, drones, tape fluttering in the wind. The sheriff knew Young, trying to look confident, told reporters it was nothing but flood debris. The town nodded politely, pretended to believe him. Everyone had learned that pretending was safer. But that night, under the harsh light of the evidence room, a deputy cleaned the mud off the keychain and froze. The letters shimmered faintly, like fresh etching. Beneath them, something new had appeared. Found her. The deputy locked the door, checked the clock, and called no one. Some things were better unread. Miles south, in a desert town motel, thunder rolled again. The red pickup from the week before sat parked by the road driver's seat, empty headlights on. Inside the room, the bed was unmade, the window open, the curtains breathing with the wind. On the nightstand, a folded note lay beneath the old badge of Deputy Daniel Morales. One sentence written in careful, steady hand. The water called. I answered. Outside, the storm swept across the highway, rain hammering the asphalt in sheets. Drivers swerved engines, hissing through puddles. A trucker passing mile marker 118 would later swear he saw someone walking along the shoulder in the downpour, a woman hair plastered to her face coat, dark with rain. She didn't raise her thumb. She didn't look lost. Just walked toward the lightning, toward the east, toward the direction of Denton Creek. The trucker slowed, leaned out. His window shouted if she needed a ride. She didn't turn. When he looked again, she was gone. By morning, the motel was empty. Room key on the counter. No bags, no car. The cleaning lady found only one thing, a cassette tape left inside the TV. She pressed play. The river never forgets, the voice said softly, and neither do I. The tape clicked off. At the same hour, Denton Creek overflowed its banks again. The current churned brown and violent, swallowing the path, the fences, the last yellow scraps of police tape. Under the surface, something metallic spun once before sinking back into the mud. No one would know that 3 miles upstream, near the place where Caroline Baker's truck was found in 1985, a new cottonwood had taken root. Its bark still young, its roots deep in silt. But if you looked close enough, you could see letters burned into the wood by lightning, faint but unmistakable. CB plus LM? The water shimmered around it, calm for the first time in decades. Some said the river finally slept that night. Others swore they heard footsteps on the bridge long after midnight, slow and steady, moving toward the sound of the water. And if you stood by the bank in the gray hour before dawn, you might have heard a woman's voice carried on the wind, low, certain, and almost kind. I found her.